I worked at Harmon Structural for 22 years. That's not a typo. 22 years of early mornings, late Friday calls, and more red-eye flights to job sites than I can honestly count. I was a civil engineer, not a rock star, not a visionary, just a guy who knew load-bearing concrete better than he knew his own neighborhood. And for a long time, that was enough. The company was a mid-sized structural engineering firm out of Columbus, Ohio. We did bridges, overpasses, municipal infrastructure, the unsexy work that nobody photographs but everybody uses. The kind of work where, if you get it wrong, people die. That weight never left me. Not once in 22 years. My name is Lawrence. I was 53 years old when this happened. I want to be clear about something before I get into it. I'm not a dramatic person. I don't like conflict. I've never enjoyed confrontation. My ex-wife used to say I'd apologize to a chair if I bumped into it. So when I tell you what happened at the company's annual leadership summit, I need you to understand, I didn't go in there planning any of this. It just unfolded the way it did because I'd spent 2 decades doing one thing right, reading everything before I signed it. The trouble started about 18 months before the summit, when the board brought in a new COO. His name was Clifton. I won't use his last name. He came from a tech firm in Austin, had a master's from Northwestern, and spoke exclusively in frameworks. Everything was a scalable solution, or a paradigm shift, or a portfolio of capabilities. First week on the job, he walked through our floor, looked at the drafting tables. Yes, we still had some drafting tables, because some of our engineers were old school and it worked, and said, loud enough for 3 people to hear, "This looks like a government office from 1987. I knew then. I didn't say anything. I just knew. Clifton spent his first 6 months reorganizing the org chart. He flattened hierarchies, eliminated what he called redundant legacy roles, and created a new team called the Innovation and Process Acceleration Unit, which as far as anyone could tell did nothing except attend workshops and present slides with gradient backgrounds. He hired 4 people under 35 for that team, paid them better than engineers with a decade of field experience. I kept my head down. I did my work. I had a project in the pipeline that mattered more to me than almost anything I'd ever touched professionally. A municipal pedestrian bridge project for the city of Dayton. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a design I'd spent 14 months developing. The load calculations, the material sourcing, the drainage integration, the accessibility compliance, all of it was mine. Every single component. I developed a proprietary calculation methodology for the tension system that the company had started using on 3 other projects because it reduced material cost by roughly 11% without sacrificing any structural integrity. The methodology was documented in a 200-page technical report I'd authored, and it existed inside a broader project file I built and maintained entirely on my own system. 6 months before the summit, Clifton called me into his office. He told me I was being realigned. I asked what that meant. He said my role was being restructured. I would no longer be the lead engineer on the Dayton Bridge project. That responsibility was going to someone named Patrick, one of the Innovation Unit hires, 29 years old, fresh PMP certification, no field experience. He'd be overseeing all active projects going forward under a new integrated delivery model. I sat with that for a second. Then I asked about my compensation. Clifton slid a paper across the desk. My base salary was being reduced by 18%. He called it a role calibration adjustment. He said it with a straight face. I picked up the paper. I looked at it. I set it back down. I said, "I'll review this and get back to you." He seemed surprised I didn't argue. I think he expected me to either blow up or crumble. I did neither. I just stood up, thanked him for his time, and walked back to my desk. That night, I pulled out my employment contract, the original one from when I joined the firm, plus the 2 amendments that had been added over the years. One when I made senior engineer, one when I was designated as a technical specialist. I read all of it. Every page, every footnote, every abidge etched at the back. And I found it. Exhibit C, Section 4, Paragraph 2. It was about 12 lines of dense legal language regarding what the company called independently developed methodologies and technical documentation. The language was specific: any technical methodology, calculation system, or documentation that was developed by an employee during non-designated work hours, using personal equipment, and not arising from a direct company assignment, was considered the intellectual property of the employee, not the firm. I had developed the tension calculation methodology at home, on weekends, on my own laptop, because I found the problem interesting and I wanted to solve it correctly before I brought it to the company. I had timestamps, I had version histories, I had emails to myself documenting the development process, dating back almost 3 years. The methodology was in the Dayton Bridge project files, yes, but it belonged to me. I didn't say a word to anyone. I called my attorney, a woman I'd used for a property matter a few years back, and I explained the situation. She read the contract language and said 3 words that I still think about: "This is yours." We spent the next 2 months quietly building documentation. I wasn't planning revenge. I genuinely wasn't. I was protecting myself because I'd watched what happened to a colleague named Frank 2 years earlier. Frank had built out an entire safety inspection protocol system for the firm, got pushed out at 61, and walked away with nothing but a severance check and a LinkedIn recommendation he had to write himself. I wasn't going to be Frank. I accepted the salary reduction. I signed the realignment paperwork. I moved to my new technical advisor role and watched Patrick slowly struggle with the Dayton project files. He was smart enough, I'll give him that, but he didn't understand the tension methodology. He kept running calculations that didn't account for the soil expansion variables I'd built into the system. I flagged it through the proper channels twice. Both times Clifton's team told me the new team had it handled. I stopped flagging it. The annual leadership summit was held in March at a hotel conference center in downtown Columbus. All senior staff, project leads, board members, a few clients. About 180 people in the main room. The agenda was themed around the new Harmon structural, basically Clifton's vision presentation, with before and after comparisons of team structures, efficiency metrics, and what he called the legacy bottleneck removal program. I knew what that last part was. I'd heard the phrase used in a meeting 3 weeks earlier, when someone asked why 2 of our longest tenured engineers had been let go. I sat in the back. Row 9. I had a cup of coffee and I was wearing a jacket I'd owned for 11 years. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was just present. Clifton took the stage about 40 minutes in, after the chairman's welcome remarks. He was polished. Good presenter, I'll give him credit. He ran through slides showing cost reductions, delivery timeline improvements, client satisfaction scores. Then he put up a slide titled Structural Transformation Phase 2. He talked about right-sizing the technical workforce. He showed a chart. On the left side was what he called the legacy profile, and the characteristics listed were high compensation, low adaptability, single discipline focus, resistance to integration. On the right side was the optimized profile, lower base cost, cross-functional, tech-native, agile-oriented. Then he said something I've thought about every day since. He said some of our most expensive retained talent has also been our biggest operational drag. We've made difficult but necessary decisions to move some of those individuals into reduced scope roles or out of the organization entirely. That's not comfortable. But this company cannot grow if we're carrying weight that doesn't carry itself. He looked out at the room. Then he looked directly at me. I don't know if he meant to, but he did. And he said, some people in this room know exactly what I'm talking about. A few people near the front laughed softly. I saw Patrick, up near the front, nod along with his arms crossed. I set my coffee down. I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my hand, politely, the way you do when you have a question in a professional setting. The moderator, a woman named Brenda from the operations team, nodded at me from the side of the stage. I said, I have a quick question before we move to the next segment. Clifton looked over. He recognized me. Something passed across his face, not quite concern, just a flicker of something. I said, "Could you ask your general counsel? I believe she's in the third row. To pull up Exhibit C, Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Standard Senior Engineer Employment Contract and read it aloud for the room." Complete silence. Clifton said, "I'm not sure this is the time or place for," I said pleasantly. "It'll only take a moment. I think it's relevant to the conversation about retained technical assets." Brenda, God bless her, looked uncertain but glanced toward the legal team. The general counsel, a woman I'd spoken to exactly once, years ago, about a vendor dispute, opened her laptop. I could see the confusion on her face from where I was sitting. She scrolled. She found it. I watched her read it once to herself. Her expression changed. She looked up at Clifton. He said quietly, "Patricia, you don't need to," I said. "I'd like it read into the public record of today's proceedings, please, per Article 7 of our Employee Handbook, which governs the conduct of official company events." I had looked that up too. Patricia cleared her throat. She read the paragraph. The room was quiet enough that you could hear the ventilation system. When she finished reading, someone near the middle said, barely above a whisper, "Does that mean what I think it means?" Clifton said, "This isn't the appropriate venue," I said. "My tension calculation methodology, which is currently integrated into the Dayton Municipal Bridge Project, the Westerville Interchange Project, and the Franklin County Corridor Project, was developed by me independently, on personal time, using personal equipment prior to any company assignment. I have time-stamped documentation, version histories, and correspondence going back 34 months. Under the contract, language Patricia just read, that methodology belongs to me, not to Harmon Structural." The room did not erupt. It went very, very still. "I wasn't done," I said. "I also want to note, for anyone who's been copied on the last 2 technical flagging memos I submitted regarding the Dayton project, that the current calculation model being used by the project team does not correctly apply that methodology. Specifically, the soil expansion variables in the eastern tension array have been incorrectly zeroed out. If that bridge is built to the current spec, it will not meet the load requirements under Ohio Code Section 5501.47. I have the corrected documentation if anyone would like to see it." I picked up my coffee. I took a sip. Clifton looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. The chairman, who was seated at a table to the left of the stage, was already leaning over and whispering to the general counsel. I could see Patricia pulling up something else on her laptop. I could see her nodding. I waited. The chairman stood up. He said, "I think we need to take a short recess." It was a 90-minute recess. I sat in the lobby and drank a second cup of coffee and called my attorney to tell her it had gone exactly as we'd discussed. She said, "How'd they take it?" I said, "About how you'd expect." The negotiations that followed took 11 weeks. I won't walk through all of it, because honestly it was mostly my attorney doing the work, and she deserves more credit than I can give her here. But the short version, Harmon Structural did not own the methodology. Their own contract said so, and their own general counsel had read it aloud in front of 180 people, which made any subsequent argument fairly difficult. The methodology was integrated into 3 active projects with a combined contract value of roughly $47 million. Without licensed access to my documentation and ongoing consultation, those projects were in jeopardy. They had a choice: negotiate in good faith, or spend years in court while 3 municipal contracts dissolved. They negotiated. I licensed the methodology back to them, a structured licensing agreement, not a sale, at a consulting rate, my attorney said, and they accepted after minimal pushback. The Dayton project was restructured. I was brought back as the technical lead, not Patrick, whose reassignment was handled quietly and without public announcement. My salary was restored plus a 15% increase, framed as a retention premium for technical specialists, a category that apparently now existed. Clifton resigned 7 weeks after the summit. The official statement said he was pursuing other opportunities. I don't know where he went. I didn't ask. The bridge opened 11 months later. I drove out to Dayton on a Sunday morning when there was no ceremony, no ribbon cutting, no one taking photos. Just people walking across it, an older man walking a beagle, two teenagers on bikes, a woman pushing a stroller with one hand and eating a granola bar with the other. I parked my car on the far side and walked across it myself, once, from end to end. The tension system hummed exactly the way it was supposed to. The expansion joints had the right give, the railings were at the right height. Everything was exactly the way the calculations said it would be. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt like the job got done the right way. I think about Frank sometimes. I wonder if he knew what was in Exhibit C. Probably not. Most people don't. Most people sign a 50-page employment contract and file it away and never look at it again. I get it. It's dry. It's dense. It's not the kind of thing you want to sit with on a Tuesday night. But that document is a record of what you agreed to and what was agreed to for you, and those are not always the same thing. Read your contracts, all of them, not just the parts that seem important, the footnotes, the exhibits, the clauses that start with, "notwithstanding anything herein." That's where the real agreements live. Clifton told a room full of people that some employees carry weight that doesn't carry itself. He just didn't check whether some of that weight was actually holding the building up. I've had a lot of time to think about what actually happened in that conference room. Not the legal part, my attorney handled that cleanly, but the part that I keep turning over in my mind at 6 in the morning when I'm on my second cup of coffee and the house is quiet. Clifton wasn't stupid. That's the thing people miss when they hear a story like this. He was genuinely intelligent, well-credentialed, and probably right about a lot of things when it came to organizational efficiency. But intelligence without integrity is just a sharper tool for doing the wrong thing faster. He walked into a firm he didn't understand, made decisions about people he hadn't bothered to know, and called it leadership. That gap between appearing to lead and actually understanding what you're responsible for is where his whole situation collapsed. And here's the part I keep coming back to. I didn't outmaneuver him. I just outlasted him. I showed up every day for 22 years and did the work correctly, documented it carefully, and read the paperwork before I signed it. None of that is dramatic. None of that is dramatic. It's just what you're supposed to do. And most people don't do it because it's tedious and unglamorous and nobody praises you for it until the moment it matters enormously. That's the thing about integrity. It doesn't pay off on a schedule. You can't decide to be thorough only when it's convenient, because you never know in advance which Tuesday night is the one that counts. I developed that methodology on weekends because I found the problem interesting and I wanted to solve it right. Not because I was protecting myself, not because I sensed trouble coming. Just because doing work halfway has always felt physically uncomfortable to me, like wearing a shoe on the wrong foot. And the discipline of that, of finishing the thing correctly even when no one is watching, even when you won't be graded on it, that's what made the difference. Not luck, not connections, not some dramatic moment of courage, just years of consistent, unglamorous work that left a paper trail Clifton's legal team couldn't argue with. Patrick, the young guy they put in my place, I genuinely don't hold anything against him. He was handed a situation he wasn't equipped for by people who should have known better. The board put Clifton in that role. Clifton put Patrick in mine. The failures cascaded from decisions made at the top, and the ones at the bottom, including Patrick, including the municipal clients, were left managing the consequences. That's worth remembering the next time someone explains away an institutional failure by pointing at the person holding the bag. I walked across that bridge in Dayton on a Sunday morning, and I felt nothing dramatic. Just quiet. Just the sound of expansion joints doing exactly what the load calculations said they'd do. And I thought, this is what the work is actually for. Not the licensing agreement, not the salary restoration, not watching Clifton submit his resignation letter 7 weeks later. The bridge, the beagle and the stroller, and the teenagers on bikes. Do the work right. Read what you sign, document what you build, and when someone tells a room full of people that you don't carry your weight, stay in your seat, stay calm, and let the paperwork answer for you. That's all I did. It was enough.